Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report News Hour for the 6th month and 10th day by the heavenly calendar in the 16th year of Chungi. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Chungi, Kim Jong-un. And on the solar calendar, of course, today is July 4th, Independence Day, 249th birthday of the United States of America. So congratulations to America. Let's go take our tour around the kingdom. And right now, in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, 64 degrees and sunny, getting up to 91 today, mostly sunny and warm. Stay hydrated for Independence Day celebrations. And then tonight, clear, good viewing conditions for fireworks, low of 65. Meanwhile, in father's hometown, Cheongju, North Pyongan Province, Korea, currently 78, getting down to 74 tonight. Warm and very humid with low clouds, occasional late night rain. And a thunderstorm tomorrow, getting up to 84, cloudy and humid, with strong thunderstorms in spots. And then in Northeast Pennsylvania at the Cheonrygung Palace, it's currently 61 and sunny, less humid with plenty of sunshine today. Nice weather to celebrate Independence Day, high of 81. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy and cool. Getting down to 49 degrees. Yes, into the 40s. This is July 4th, 49 degrees. Well, at least it's not snowing. Okay. At the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, 72 and mostly cloudy right now. 83 for a high today, times of clouds and sun with a couple of showers and a thunderstorm. Tonight, low of 74, cloudy and humid, good viewing conditions for fireworks. And then at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, right now, 80 degrees and mostly cloudy, clearing and humid, low of 75 tonight. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy and very hot. High of 98 degrees tomorrow. Yes, 98 at the Suncheon Palace. At the palaces in Gunma, Japan, currently 80 degrees and mostly cloudy. Tonight getting down to 75, a brief shower too this evening, otherwise cloudy and very humid. 75 for a low, and then tomorrow 90 degrees for a high, remaining very warm and humid with times of sun and clouds. Thunderstorm on the prowl in the afternoon. And Yilan, Taiwan, currently 86 and clear. Tonight remaining partly cloudy through the night, low of 78. And tomorrow mostly sunny and hot, high of 97. So who got the prize today? I guess it was Suncheon Palace. Is 98 degrees tomorrow in the forecast. All right. Let's go to Father's Word. I'm in the book on, let's see here, Blessed Families. And this is chapter 3, where Father's going through each of the blessed families and explaining their providential significance. And I've opened to the section on the 430 couple blessing. Yes, so this is chapter 3, section 4.2. When I blessed the 430 couples, I told them to become tribal messiahs. That does not mean that they can go off and just live happily themselves. In other words, they have a mission similar to that of Jesus and the Holy Spirit. In other words, 부활한 예수와 성신의 실체로서 그 시적을 구하는 역사를 하는 정적적 메시가 되라는 것입니다. So, 성신의 실체. So, in other words, I told them to become the substantiations of Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, to bring salvation to their tribes. That they should do the mission of a Messiah that is not a spiritual Messiah, but an actual substantial Messiah. All right. So this was in, well, he's speaking in 1971, but he's referring to his comments to the 430 couples, I guess, in 1968, since that is when the 430 couple blessing took place, as we know through our study of Unification Church history. All right. So Father's been speaking about tribal messiahs since 1968, at least since then. Father has explained that the 430 reason it was 430 is that that particular year, 1968, corresponded to the year 4300 in the traditional calendar of Korea, which dates its origin to the mythical founding of the nation 4,300 years ago. And so it was 430 couples for that reason. So 430 represents all the people of Korean Peninsula. And it was the first time that a non-Korean couple was blessed. Mr. Kuboki and his wife of Japan were included in that 430 couple blessing. And of course, after 430 couples in 1969, Father went to Japan, where he blessed 12 couples, and then to the US and Germany. And the three places combined, he blessed 43 couples, so that the 430 was connected to the worldwide providence in that way. And then, of course, in 1970, he blessed 777 couples where there were more international couples, and then 1,800 couples, and then the couples that were blessed in 1982, and so forth and so on. So this is the way that God works in concentric circles. He started with one man, true father, and then Hakchahan was the woman that he selected out of the fallen world to remove her fallen nature, and then also to train and educate her to become the true mother eventually. Unfortunately, she betrayed him later on, but she was in that position for 50 plus years. And so then after that, after his blessing, that first blessing in 1960 and 61, I think there were the total of 36 couples. 36 couple blessing was actually done in a number of stages. First, there were the three couples. Three couples, of course, were Kim Won-pil and Yoo Hyo-won and Kim Yong-hee. Those were the three couples. And then 36 couples. In total, 60 and 61, and then 72 couples, because each of the 36 couples then had Cain and Abel to support them. And then 124 couples a couple years after that. At the time that blessing was performed, the number of UN nation states was 124. And so Father did that to represent all the nations of the world. So Father's always been looking at the worldwide situation, because his ultimate goal has always been to bring God's salvation to every single human being in the world, and to return the world to God in a state where there is not a single vestige of sin. I remember hearing him say that he could not wait to offer up the world to God in a state where there was not a single vestige of sin in the world. We still have some work to do on that. But you know what? Father's still working as well. He's working in the spirit world. He's working to unite the spirit world. And we're going to see some really fascinating things happening around us, I believe. All right. So let's see what is going on today. Of course, yesterday, I'm sure you must have heard that President Trump's big, beautiful bill, as he called it, passed the House in exactly the same form that was passed in the Senate. The House chose not to make any changes after the Senate had passed their version. And so today it's going to President Trump, and he is going to sign it. We assume. Well, he's been working hard on it, and he's been sort of pressuring people to come around, the Republicans to come around. So here, Breitbart is celebrating this strongest legislation ever for workers, it says, and families. Border security blocks tax hike. And Democrats meltdown of the ages, U.S. signing of the 4th of July, historic Trump victory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what's missing from this Breitbart list? What's missing? They never talk about, I have not seen anybody talk about the fact that a provision of this bill raises the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. That's missing. Now, the debt ceiling had to be raised. I mean, that's just an unfortunate fact of life. Actually, the previous debt ceiling was reached back in January. I think right on the day that the President Trump was inaugurated. And since then, the Treasury Department has been doing all sorts of things, sort of bringing funds from one place to another to keep from going over the debt ceiling. One thing they've done, of course, is the Treasury General Account, which is the Treasury Department's checking account in the Federal Reserve Bank. They've been spending that down, and also they've been withholding payments into certain pension funds and those kinds of things. And so now that they've been funded, now that there's a budget, or as soon as President Trump signs it today, those payments are going to be made, the ones that have been sort of suspended and sort of waiting and stuff like that. So there's going to be a great deal of spending probably in the next week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks. And the interesting thing is that this is going to take money out of the economy, because the Treasury Department has to replenish, for example, they have to replenish their Treasury general account, and so they're going to be taking money out of the money supply, the general money supply, in order to do that. So money may be a little bit tighter next several weeks, which is actually the opposite of what President Trump wants, ironically. But that's fairly short term. But also, yesterday we got the jobs numbers, right? And I think we referred to it just briefly yesterday, where many more jobs were created during May, or June, I guess. June, I'm sorry. Many more jobs were created during June than were expected. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that the economy is going hot. The economy is going great. That's one indication anyway. There may be other indicators that have an opposite message, but at least the fact that the jobs are being created shows that the economy is going great. So is the Fed going to raise rates or lower rates? Well, if the economy is going great, the common sense of the Fed, and frankly, I think, you and I could probably serve with maybe not, but but for them, I think it's going to be a pretty easy choice. They're not going to lower rates when the economy is going hot like this, and that's going to irritate President Trump again. And earlier this week he sent I think it was a handwritten letter to Jerome Powell, and he's doing all sorts of things to try and influence him, including potentially naming his successor. Hasn't done that yet, but he's hinted that he's going to do that. But we'll see. But the struggle between President Trump and Jerome Powell is definitely going to continue. But my concern, of course, is that, with the debt ceiling going up to $5 trillion, okay, how long is that going to last? Well, I remember a couple of months back, maybe it's more than that, we had this analysis that the debt ceiling is going up, or the national debt is going up by $1 trillion every 100 days. Remember that? So $5 trillion, just roughly, sort of ballpark, back of the envelope figuring. I guess I guess that should last us 500 days, except that it's accelerating. But anyway, let's just figure 500 days, which would take us beyond the midterm election. And I don't think it's a coincidence. They asked themselves, how much do we need to raise the debt ceiling that we don't have to deal with this issue until after the midterm elections, but not so much after that we're getting into the presidential election. And I think the number that came up with was 5 trillion. And so that apparently is what it's going to be. All right. But the government is going to continue to run a $2 trillion deficit. In other words, the taxes collected are not going to cover all the expenditures, which include, of course, now about $1 trillion in debt interest payments a year. So I don't know what Breitbart is celebrating. It seems to me that this is pretty definite proof that our system is broken. President Trump today is going to go to Iowa to kick off a year-long celebration of America's 250th birthday. And no, that's great. Everybody likes birthdays. That's great. 250, that's a good round number. Says here, President Donald Trump will be in Iowa to kick off a year of patriotic festivities leading up to next year's 250th anniversary of American independence. President Trump campaigned on a promise to deliver a spectacular year-long birthday party to mark 250 years of American independence. On Thursday, he will be in U.S. heartland, so I guess this is yesterday, right? To kick off the patriotic festivals leading up to next year's anniversary. Apparently this was, well, no, 144. Okay. Well, let's see. Thursday was yesterday. The event at the Iowa State Grounds in Des Moines will feature dazzling displays of Americana and American history, musical performances, and a fireworks show to cap the night, said U.S. Ambassador Monica Crowley, Trump's liaison to the organizing group, America 250. Organizers see the coming year of festivities as a way to help unite a polarized nation and bridge partisanship, a monumental task. Yeah, that is true. Given the country's divides, Thursday's event comes as the Republican-controlled Congress pushed for final passage. That's already passed. Iowa was a logical choice for the kickoff, Crowley said, because of its central location and Trump's affinity for the state, which supported him in each of the last 3 general elections. She also said Iowa's middle-of-the-country geography is symbolic of the desire to use the coming celebrations to help bring people together. And of course, not to mention the fact that Iowa always kicks off the presidential primary season, which now is getting close. Just, 2.5 years away? Yeah, 2.5 years away. Yeah, so January 2028. So yes, about 2.5 years. We've had so much division and so much polarization over the last many decades, but certainly over the last few years, that to be able to bring the country together to celebrate America's 250th birthday through patriotism, shared values, and a renewed sense of civic pride, to be able to do that in the center of the country is incredibly important, she said. Okay. A recent Gallup poll showed the widest partisan split in patriotism in over 2 decades, with only about a third of Democrats saying they are proud to be American, compared to with about 9 in 10 Republicans. About 4 in 10 U.S. adults approve of Trump's performance as president, according to a June AP NORC poll, while about 6 in 10 disapprove. The poll also showed a majority of Americans said the June military parade was not a good use of government money. Well, they have their polls. We have ours. Let's check ours. Here we go. Okay. And 49 approve, and 48 disapprove, according to the Rasmussen poll. And that's 36 who strongly approve and 41 who strongly disapprove, giving him a presidential approval index rating of -5. Let's see if we can get this. I guess not. Okay, here we go. Okay, yeah. So yeah, so the his approval has taken a nosedive in the last couple of days, down from 51. He spent most of his time so far above the 50% mark, but today I see that he's down, and the strongly disapprove has spiked up, and the strongly approve has notched down a bit. So I think the media has been doing a huge media propaganda campaign against this bill that just passed. So I wonder if maybe that's the effect that it's having. Crowley spoke to the political and ideological schisms that left the country torn apart ahead of the last big birthday celebration, noting that 1976 closely followed the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal that led Richard Nixon to resign from the presidency. That moment was critical to uniting the country moving forward, and I am very optimistic and hopeful that the year-long celebration that we're about to launch will do the same thing in this present moment. America's 250th birthday is something that I think that all Americans can come together to celebrate and honor our history, as well as our present and our future, Crowley said. Well, I think it would behoove us probably to go back to Father's speeches at the 2 events that he held in 1976, one at Yankee Stadium and one at the Washington Monument, and see whether America over the past 50 years has responded to what Father said in those speeches. I think we might do that. We might do that as the year goes on. I think we might actually do that during our Wednesday broadcast. Yeah, but as I mentioned yesterday, my feeling is that really, well, first of all, let me preface my feeling by saying that the Father has said that neither democracy nor communism is going to bring about God's kingdom. That both are insufficient as a way of governing communism for obvious reasons, but also democracy. And we're seeing the disadvantages of democracy more and more, aren't we? I think the election of a communist Muslim in New York, or I'm sorry, election by the Democrats in New York of a communist Muslim as their candidate for the next mayor of New York is one strong indication that the political system is broken. And also the way that the Kamala Harris was not elected to be the Democrat candidate last year, but was rather crowned when the Democrat establishment decided to bring the boom down on Joe Biden. They didn't have a primary or anything. They just declared that Kamala Harris was going to be the candidate instead. So democracy has been suffering a lot. Democrats keep calling it that they're saving democracy, but actually they're the ones that are threatening democracy more than anyone. Of course, the way that the CIA attacked President Trump in 2016 and 2020 did everything they could to undermine him. And also other government agencies, FBI and other agencies also doing the same thing, shows that democracy in America is, well, I guess the nice way to put it would be to say that it's very, very sick. We'll see whether President Trump can turn things around. Well, maybe he can, but fundamentally, though, I think we've seen that there are characteristics of democracy that make it unqualified, make it less than qualified to be the ideal way in which a human society can be governed. The Chattanooga Constitution, of course, is a libertarian Republican monarchy. And that's the best way to describe it. But I think if you study the Chattanooga Constitution, you can go to sanctuary-pa.org/Constitution, or actually recently we're trying to promote a different URL, aren't we? Different homepage. It's what is it? It's sanctuaryusa.org. Okay, go to sanctuaryusa.org, and you can poke around and find the Constitution there. The Chattanooga Constitution. It's a libertarian Republican monarchy, maximizing freedom, but also it's based on the teachings of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, and there's a king. There is a king. Yes, we just had all these demonstrations of no kings, but we'll see. I think America is probably going to get a king. Well, the world is going to get a king pretty soon. And the Constitution, if you read the end, it says that the Constitution guarantees either a monarchy or a Republican form of government for every state in the Union. And so if America doesn't want a king, that's fine. It can be a republic. America can be a republic. That's no problem. A country like Japan, they probably want a monarchy because they already got one, right? So either one is okay, no problem. And what are the powers of that king? Then, for example, the Japanese emperor. Who's going to decide that? Well, the Japanese people will decide that, because that will be their constitution, not the federal constitution. The Chattanooga Constitution only defines the powers, or the lack thereof, of the federal government, not the state governments in most cases. Okay. All right, so President Trump to kick off a year-long celebration of the 250th anniversary. Great. But what I do want to bring up this article, Ray Dalio, a professional investor, and is successful at that. And, you know, you have to be careful about these people. If they say that the economy is going to crash, it may be that they want you to sell your stocks so that they can buy them. If they say that the economy is going to go great guns, it may be that they want you to buy stocks so they can sell them. So you have to be careful. They, you know, they are professional money makers, basically. Okay, so, but we can take a look at it and sort of use it as an advisory thing. Anyway, he's warning of a big painful disruptions after Congress passes Trump's spending bill. Bridgewater founder warns of economic consequences unless deficit is reduced from 7% to 3% of GDP. Right. So instead of $2 trillion of deficit, which, you know, about 7%, he wants to reduce that to 3%. So that means $2 trillion to less than $1 trillion. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to knock off $1 trillion of a deficit? Elon Musk tried. I don't think he succeeded. But anyway, let's see what's going on here. Congress officially passed the beautiful bill, and billionaire Ray Dalio is warning about the possible economic consequences, which could include spending cuts, major tax increases, and massive money printing. Unless this path is soon rectified to bring the budget deficit from roughly 7% of GDP to about 3% by making adjustments to spending, taxes, and interest rates. And when he's talking about making adjustments to taxes, he's not talking about reducing taxes. He's talking about increasing taxes, which no politician in his right mind wants to do, right? That's the best way to get yourself voted out of office. Ask Daddy Bush, right? Ask him, yes. He said he was not going to read. He said, no new taxes, read my lips during the campaign. And then after he got into became president, then he broke that promise. And guess what? He only got a single term. The interest rates big painful disruptions will likely occur, Dalio, the Bridgewater Associates wrote in a post on X Thursday. Dalio said the bill, which now heads to the president's desk to be signed into law, is expected to result in yearly deficits of $2 trillion with revenues of about $5 trillion, exceeded by spending of almost $7 trillion. Right, revenues of $5 trillion, spending $7 trillion, so the difference is $2 trillion. This deficit would increase the national debt over the next decade, pushing the debt, currently the equivalent of about $230,000 per U.S. family, to about $425,000 per family, he warned. Paying off this debt will become increasingly expensive. Interest and principal payments on the debt would rise from around $10 trillion, $1 trillion of which is interest, to around $18 trillion, $2 trillion of which would be interest. So right now we're spending $1 trillion a year on interest in the national debt. Interest on the national debt, we're spending $1 trillion. Without that, we could slash the federal deficit in half, but the government has to pay $1 trillion a year in interest on its debt. And then he says it's going to increase to $2 trillion. This would result in either spending being slashed, unimaginable tax increases, or a lot of printing and devaluing of money and pushing interest rates to unattractive low levels, he said. So this is why I was saying, President Trump said, listen, if this bill doesn't pass, he was saying of the BBB bill, if this bill doesn't pass, taxes are going to go up by 68%, I think he said. And my reaction was, well, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe we need a huge increase in taxes. Of course, no politician in his right mind will agree with me, and maybe no one in the country in his right mind will agree with me. Well, we can suffer now or we can suffer later, all right? And it's going to be worse. We have some very difficult times coming down the pipe. And we'll see what happens. But it's not going to be a good thing. And so then taxing or a lot of printing and devaluing of money and pushing interest rates to unattractively low levels, he said. Why? Right. Because it's going to become more and more difficult to sell the American debt, the Treasury Department's debt. People are going to be saying, hey, wait a second, how do we know that you're going to be actually servicing this, much less paying it back? And so they'll be pushing interest rates to unattractively low levels. So last month, Dalio similarly sounded the alarm on America's chronic spending. Okay, we're spending 40% more than we're taking in, and this is a chronic problem, he said. So what you're seeing is the debt service payments beginning to squeeze away, not beginning, well, into squeezing away. So it's like plaque in the arteries, squeezing away buying power. And as you do the numbers, you will see that you have an economic heart attack as a result of that. On Thursday afternoon, Congress passed the bill, okay, all but two of House Republicans, right, 218, 214, okay. And I think one guy actually changed his vote later on. So I think it was just one Republican that finally voted against. So Ray Dalio, and I think I don't take his word as the gospel truth, but we do need to pay attention, I think. Yeah. All right, so we'll see what happens with this. And well, President Trump put a lot of effort into getting this passed. So now he owns it, right? So if it leads to something great, he'll get the credit. But if it leads to economic collapse or economic disruption, then he's going to have to take the responsibility. Remember, who was it? The Republican strategist was saying that, right after President Trump was elected, I think he was saying that President Trump needs to get something done by July 4th, which will affect people's pocketbooks in 2016, so that they will be more inclined to vote for Republican candidates in the midterm election. And I guess President Trump took that advice to heart, and so that's why he came up with this self-imposed deadline of July 4th. And fortunately for him, I guess he was able to pull it off. Once he set that deadline, then if he had not been able to pull it off, then it would have undermined his political capital. But now that he was successful, it raises his political capital because it shows that he has pretty strong control over his Congress. So we'll see how things develop July, August, and into autumn. But hey. All right, let's see what else do we have today? Oh yeah, this is something that I find somewhat disturbing. Okay, let's look at it together. Trump administration launches a searchable national citizenship database. Isn't this the kind of thing that we've been avoiding? I don't know. This sounds more like, databases are useful for people who want to concentrate power, right? Now, I understand why they're doing this. They're doing it so that so as to prevent non-U.S. citizens from registering to vote, and that's certainly a good thing. Anyway, let's look at this. Trump administration launched a searchable database. For the first time, the Department of Homeland Security has built a nationwide citizenship database that merges immigration and Social Security data. for the first time. Developed with the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, this centralized system. And there we have the word centralized, and we always have to be careful of that word, right? It's a centralized system. Let's election, oops, I missed part of that. Let's election off, well, come on now. Let's election officers search citizen status for voter certification. I think I'm saying yeah, voter certification. Okay. Previously, officials relied on limited paperwork or a disjointed set of databases. Now the system aims to swiftly spot potential fraud with additional DMV data possibly coming soon. Okay. Despite DHS claims about efficiency, privacy advocates and legal experts warn that consolidating data without transparency raises serious concerns about security and misuse. And yes, I agree with this. And I understand that we need to make sure that non-citizens are not voting, but is this the only way that we can do that? And it seems to me that there are going to be some unintended consequences here, which are going to outweigh the benefits. I just have that feeling. Lawsuits have already challenged the database in Maryland, and union members sued over broad access to sensitive personal information, winning a temporary block to Social Security Administration data sharing. Okay. Critics highlight that the database was built with little public input, potentially sidestepping the Privacy Act of 1974 and undermining established safeguards. Right. So yes. Yeah, so that's so we can think about that, but centralized, you're right there. That's a red flag right there. And also, this is for voter registration, right? And we know that America's election system is done by states, but now we have the federal government creating a database, which they say, oh, no, this is only for the use of election officials, and we're not going to be involved in certifying or not certifying people who are trying to register to vote. But it's a foot in the door. It's a foot in the door. It's a foot in the door, isn't it? So we'll see how that develops. And apparently there are going to be some lawsuits on this, and we'll see how it finally shakes out. I imagine those lawsuits will go to the Supreme Court over time, and we'll have to see what the result is. All right, let's see what else is going on. And because today's July 4th, we have all kinds of stories that are related to that. 3,500-mile journey and the meaning of the 4th of July. Okay, the Epoch Times traveled from coast to coast asking people what the 4th of July means to them and their families. Okay. Fireworks families focus on making 4th of July magical. How to keep your dog calm during 4th of July fireworks, according to veterinarian. Okay, that's good. That really, I think that hurts their ears. Trump touts passage of tax cut bill in Iowa speech. So it was Friday that he was in Iowa. Okay, and let's take a look at this, see what he has to say. Trump delivers remarks. Is this a vote? No, this is a, okay, this is a video. Okay, let's try this one. Des Moines, Iowa, President Donald Trump praised the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act in a speech at the Iowa State Fairgrounds, marking the start of a year-long celebration of America's 250th anniversary. The president celebrated the bill's passage earlier in the day with a post on social media. And let's see, at the fair ahead of the speech, thousands of attendees wore Trump merchandise with red, white, and blue garb, making the colors of the day. The choice of Iowa for Trump's message also carried political weight after he won its 2024 caucuses in a landslide and carried it by 13 points in the general election last November. The event in Iowa marks the first in a year-long series of nationwide celebrations honoring the nation's 250th anniversary. Okay, and we all know all this. Okay, well, what did Trump say? What did Trump say? I guess they don't have that. The president said special events are planned at parks and battlefields nationwide, and every department and agency will participate in festivities with federal buildings festooned with patriotic decor, the statement from the White House said. Trump also teased a UFC fight at the White House with thousands of spectators. He said a newly signed executive order that raised park entrance fees for foreign tourists will help fund the events. Well, I tell you, it's not a good year to be a foreign tourist, is it? They get you coming and going. They're going to charge extra for foreign tourists. Well, state parks charge more for out-of-state tourists or out-of-state visitors, so I suppose this is all right. With Independence Day, in Japan now, in restaurants, and apparently many restaurants, they're charging tourists more for the same food than what they charge Japanese. I'm going to have to test that the next time I go to Japan. And if they try to charge me more, I think I'm going to complain. Hey, listen, I was born here. And chances are I'll be older than the waiter. So I've been in Japan longer than you have. Well, we'll see how that works. Anyway. But the world is going crazy. All right, the world is going crazy, and it's going to get even crazier. All right, let's see. The national parks will be about America first. With Independence Day looming, he spoke of a need to honor the flag, the founding fathers, and the principles the nation was built on. Well, yes, the principles the nation was built on. Nice to mention. I don't hear that mentioned so often anymore. But this is the point that father was emphasizing, wasn't it? In 1976, 50 years ago, that America needs to return to its founding principles. And I think we need to examine just how well we've carried that out in the last 50 years. Chants of USA flooded the fairgrounds on multiple occasions. And a warning to those seeking to undermine the United States and referencing the primary win of New York State Representative Zohran Mamdani, the race for New York City mayor, the president who hails from the city denounced communism. As president of the United States, I'm proclaiming here and now that America is never going to be communist in any way, shape, or form. And that includes New York City, Trump said. Mamdani, a Democrat, is a self-described democratic socialist. But, he's made a number of proposals, both recently and in the past, that show that he is communist. For example, I guess 3 years ago, he was saying that billionaires should not exist. And he's trying to become the mayor of the city that has more billionaires than any other city in the world. And he says billionaires should not exist. And, he has these, state or government operated grocery stores, right? Wait a second. Isn't that what they have in communist countries? Presumably in the government operated grocery stores, Who's going to set the prices? The government, right? Doesn't that sound familiar? Isn't that what they do in communist countries? The government sets the prices. And then also he has a housing thing that he was talking about. It's a communal housing as well. He was going to buy up all sorts of land using, I'm not sure what money, but he was going to buy up all sorts of housing and then converting them to communal housing situations. So, hey, listen, if it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's a duck. And he's definitely a communist. He quacks like a communist, he walks like a communist, and he certainly looks like a communist. So he is definitely a communist. And this is why I say that the American system is broken. That such a person could be elected, not anywhere in America. And of course, the other sign that America is broken is that Kamala Harris is at the head of the head of the polls, is ahead in deciding who's going to be the next governor of California. I mean, that lady, she needs to go somewhere. She needs to get out of politics, but apparently she needs a job, I guess. But President Trump is saying that America will never be communist. Well, it's nice to say, but if you want to prevent America from becoming communist, then you actually have to do some things. And that is to strengthen the private sector, and you can do that by moving functions out of the government, and putting them into the private sector. Let's do that with education, of course, and President Trump is trying to do that. The courts keep stopping him. Let's do that with healthcare. I talked about healthcare a few days ago, the difference in prices between the United States and Korea that I've experienced firsthand. Healthcare is another thing to get out of government control. And welfare, that's, of course, a big third rail, shall we say, or hugely controversial thing. But just like USAID was shut down because of all the fraud that was going on, I think we'll find that there's just an incredible amount of fraud going on in the government welfare projects as well. And as long as welfare is done by the government, then that's endemic, because there's no incentive to prevent fraud or to stop fraud when you see it. The reason there's no incentive is that there's no competition. And so people are saying, well, it's not my money, Whose money is it? Well, it's the taxpayers' money. But bureaucrats really are not all that worried about wasting taxpayers' money. So we need to get the welfare out of the government hands as well, and into private hands. And one first step might be to take the money that is going to welfare right now, the government welfare right now, and put that money into the hands of many different private welfare organizations, private charity organizations. Private charity organizations, and let them handle the money. And after a year or so, there can be a check to see who did the best job, who was most efficient. And you want to check to see how much is spent on their own administration and how much of the money actually went to people who need it. And if the administration costs are more than a certain level, for example, 20%, then you sort of knock that organization off the list for the next year's allotment, that kind of thing. So that will be a way to gradually increase private charity and decrease government welfare. And that might be a good way of doing it. Yeah. That's just one idea. But anyway, as Ray Dalio was saying, we do need to reduce the spending, and so it works for two goals, doesn't it? One, to keep America from going communist. Second, to reduce spending so as to get the government spending under control. And who knows, maybe you can even get the spending to be less than the tax revenue of $5 trillion or $5 trillion. Who knows? We'll see. But definitely, if America keeps going this way, historically, what is the step after democracy? What happens to democracies that fail? Well, they become dictatorships, don't they? They become dictatorships. And it would be sad if that would happen in America. It would be very sad. But if we don't do something radical, that may be where we are headed. Yes, America has a Second Amendment, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, let's see here. Yeah, let's see what else is on the Epoch Times. All right, Trump says he expects Hamas decision in 24 hours on the ceasefire proposal. All right, well, that's good. When did he say this? 23 hours ago? When was that? Right. U.S. President said it will be clearly within 24 hours whether terrorist groups Hamas will accept his final proposal. He was asked Friday if Hamas had agreed to the latest ceasefire framework and said, well, we'll see what happens. We are going to know over the next 24 hours. Trump announced on July 1 that Israel had agreed to the conditions of what would be a 60-day ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. My representatives had a long and productive meeting with the Israelis today on Gaza. Israel has agreed to the necessary conditions to finalize the 60-day ceasefire, during which time we will work with all parties to end the war. Okay. He stated in a social media post. All right. By the way, the Ukraine war looks like it's going to continue for a while. Two hours ago here on BBC, I think President Trump has basically stepping back from this situation. This is 2 hours ago. Kyiv hit by barrage of drone strikes as Putin rejects Trump's truce bid. A pall of acrid smoke hung over Kyiv on Friday morning following a night of intensive Russian strikes that hit almost every district in the Ukrainian capital, injuring 23 people, officials said. The hours of darkness were punctuated by the staccato of air defense guns, buzz of drones, and large explosions. Ukraine said Russia fired a record 550 drones and 11 missiles. The strikes came hours after a call between U.S. President Donald Trump and Putin, after which Trump said he was disappointed that Putin was not yet ready to end the war against Ukraine. Moscow says war will continue for as long as it is necessary to reach its objectives. Russia's overnight airstrikes broke another record, Ukraine's Air Force said, with 72 of the 550 drones penetrating air defenses, up from the previous record of 537 launched last Saturday. Air raid alerts sounded for more than 8 hours as several waves of attacks struck Kyiv, the main target of the strikes, and the Air Force said on the message app Telegram. Ukrainian President Zelensky condemned one of the most demonstratively significant and cynical attacks of the war, describing a harsh, sleepless night. Noting that it came directly after Putin's call with Trump, Zelensky added in a post on Telegram, Russia once again demonstrates that it does not intend to end the war. They called on international allies, particularly the U.S., to increase pressure on Moscow and impose greater sanctions. Footage shared on social media by Ukraine's state emergency service showed firefighters battling to extinguish fires in Kyiv after Russia's large-scale overnight attack. Well, I think it's obvious that President Trump does not have leverage with Putin for whatever reason, that Putin just is not motivated to listen to President Trump's suggestions. And why would he? You know, he's been sanctioned every way that's possible, and he's still surviving. He's still able to launch these attacks. What would be the motivation for him to stop? North Korea says that they don't say it, but the sources say North Korea may be about to send as many as 30,000 more troops to Russia. And North Korea, of course, is more than happy to supply Russia with all sorts of weapons, to test those weapons, to see how they actually work in the combat environment. China is also helping Russia, and so why would Russia want to compromise now? I think India is also buying Russian oil, I believe, and so that is also giving money to Russia as well. So unfortunately, although President Trump said during the campaign that it would take him 24 hours to end that war, yeah, he may not be able to end it for a while. We'll have to see. But you know, I've said before that for this to end, either Putin or Zelensky has to vanish from the political stage. And I'm not, you know, that can happen in many ways, but I'm just saying that as long as Zelensky's in charge in Ukraine, Putin's in charge in Russia, I don't see peace happening there. But anyway, the good news is I'm not an expert. I'm often wrong. That's the good news. All right, let's see what else we got here. Okay. Democrats hope Republicans just sealed their midterm election fates by voting for the bill. Yeah, well, one way or the other, if it's successful, probably the success or failure of this bill will have a tremendous effect on the results of next year's midterm elections. I think that's certainly true. And so the Democrats feel that they have some hope that they can actually win the elections next year, but we'll have to see. Okay, and leftist press is really playing that up. I see AP says Democrats see Trump's big bill as key to their comeback. It may not be so easy. U.S. fiscal folly could create big, beautiful debt spiral. Yes. So this is, I guess, another economist saying the same thing pretty much as Dalio. Who are they quoting here? This is, I guess, an analysis by Reuters. The U.S. tax and spending bill passed on July 3rd is expected to add more than $3 trillion to the country's deficit over the next decade. If the current debt, that would be the national debt, not the government debt. If the current debt trajectory continues unabated, it could set off a slow motion debt spiral that could endanger the Federal Reserve's independence. Well, that would be the least of our worries, but yes, that's also true. The sobering long-term debt projections of the Congressional Budget Office may actually understate the likely impact on U.S. debt to GDP levels of President Donald Trump's one big beautiful bill. Okay. All right, so yes, it's time to go, but anyway, I hope I haven't ruined your July 4th celebrations with all the pessimism, but yeah, it's a good day anyway. It's a birthday, so please go to your barbecues and be safe. Be safe. More than anything, be safe. I mentioned before that this is the kind of day that terrorists like to use to symbolize, to make, you know, a symbolic strike against America. So my advice is stay away from big crowds. Stay with your family, keep your family safe, and I'll see you tomorrow. God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.